The distress beacon cut through the peaceful morning on Kepler Station like a knife through silk. Commander Zixtal of the Galactic Peaceful Alliance nearly dropped his morning nutrition supplement when the emergency signals started blaring across every communication channel simultaneously. "By the 7 moons," he whispered, his 4 eyes focusing on the holographic display that materialized before him. The message was being broadcast on every frequency known to civilized space, repeating endlessly in 17 different languages. "This is Colony Ship Harmony's Dream calling any vessels in range. We are under attack by the Void Hunters. Our shields are failing. Population, 47,000 civilians. Coordinates follow. Please, if anyone can hear this. We need immediate assistance." Zixtal's breathing organs fluttered nervously. The Void Hunters were legendary pirates, brutal beyond measure, known for leaving no survivors. They hunted in the dark spaces between star systems, preying on merchant vessels and colony ships with ruthless efficiency. No military force had ever successfully engaged them and lived to tell about it. The coordinates showed the Harmony's Dream was drifting in the neutral zone, 3 days from the nearest Alliance patrol. Even if they scrambled their fastest ships immediately, it would be too late. 47,000 innocent lives would be lost to the cold vacuum of space. Zixtal began calculating rescue possibilities when his communications officer, a nervous Tillian named Quex, approached with trembling tentacles. "Commander," Quex said, his voice barely above a whisper, "we're receiving response signals to the distress call." "From whom?" Zixtal asked, though his hearts were already sinking. He knew no Alliance ship could reach the colony vessel in time. "Unknown signatures, sir. The response is coming from the restricted sector." The commander's 4 eyes went wide. The restricted sector was the quarantined region of space surrounding a small yellow star. Long ago, the Alliance had declared it off-limits after discovering it contained a Class 12 death world, a planet so impossibly dangerous that no civilized species could survive there. The world's gravity was crushing, its atmosphere was poison, its weather patterns were catastrophic, and its dominant species was rumored to be completely insane. "That's impossible," Zixtal breathed. "Nothing lives in that sector except—" "The Deathworlders," Quex finished, his voice barely audible. Stories about the Deathworlders were told in hushed voices throughout the galaxy. They were said to be creatures of nightmare, beings who thrived in conditions that would kill any reasonable species within minutes. Some said they were monsters with enhanced physical abilities. Others claimed they were techno-savages who solved every problem with violence. Most civilized beings believed they were myths, scary stories told to children to make them behave. But Zixtal had access to classified Alliance files. He knew the truth was far more terrifying than any myth. The Deathworlders were real, and they called themselves humans. Decades ago, when the Alliance first discovered their world, they had attempted peaceful contact. The human response had been unexpected. Instead of the usual cautious diplomatic exchanges, the humans had immediately begun asking about galactic threats, military conflicts, and dangerous regions of space. When told about pirates and hostile forces, they hadn't retreated in fear like any sensible species would. Instead, they had seemed excited. Excited. What kind of creature got excited about danger? The Alliance had quickly decided that contact with such an obviously unstable species was too dangerous. They had quarantined the system and forbidden all contact. Officially, humans didn't exist. Now, apparently, they were responding to the distress call. "Sir," Quex reported, his tentacles shaking even more violently, "we're receiving a transmission from the restricted sector. They're requesting the coordinates of the ship in distress." Zixtal stared at the communications panel as if it might explode. Giving the coordinates to the humans would be a violation of at least 47 different Alliance regulations, but 47,000 civilians were about to die, and the Alliance couldn't save them. "Commander?" another voice called from across the bridge. It was Navigation Officer Krill, a usually calm Zentorian whose scales had turned a sickly yellow color. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures moving from the restricted sector toward the distress coordinates. They're traveling at... This can't be right." "What is it?" Zixtal demanded. "Sir, they're moving at .8 light speed without using jump gates or wormholes. That should be impossible without tearing their ships apart." Zixtal felt his breathing organs seize up. .8 light speed in normal space was beyond anything the Alliance could achieve. The gravitational forces alone should have turned any crew into paste. "How many ships?" he asked weakly. "Sensors are having difficulty getting accurate readings, but it appears to be a single vessel." "One ship?" Zixtal's voice cracked. "One ship is responding to a Void Hunter attack fleet?" The humans were either the bravest beings in the galaxy or the most suicidal. Given what he knew about their species, both possibilities seemed equally likely. "Sir," Quex interrupted, "we're receiving another transmission from the human vessel. It's addressed to us specifically." On the main screen, a holographic image materialized. Zixtal had to suppress a shudder as he looked upon a human for the first time in his career. The creature was tall and lean, with pale skin stretched over a frame that looked both fragile and somehow menacing. Its forward-facing eyes suggested a predator species, and when it spoke, Zixtal could see rows of sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Retribution," the human said in perfect Alliance standard, though her accent was strange and somewhat harsh. "We've intercepted the distress call from the colony ship. We're responding to assist." The human's expression was calm, but there was something in those predator eyes that made Zixtal's skin crawl. It was the look of a creature that wasn't afraid of anything. "We estimate arrival at the target coordinates in approximately 4 hours, the human continued. "We'll handle the situation from there. Chen out." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of Kepler Station in stunned silence. "4 hours?" whispered Navigation Officer Krill. "To cross a distance that should take our fastest ships 3 days?" Zixtal slumped into his command chair, his 4 arms hanging limply at his sides. In all his years of service to the Alliance, he had never faced a situation like this. A colony ship full of civilians was under attack by the most feared pirates in the galaxy, and the only force responding was a single ship crewed by creatures from a death world. "Sir," Quex said hesitantly, "what should we do?" Zixtal looked around his bridge at the worried faces of his crew. They were all thinking the same thing. Should they warn the colony ship that humans were coming to help them? The Void Hunters were known for their cruelty, but they were at least predictable. They killed quickly and efficiently for profit. The humans, on the other hand, were completely unknown quantities. Alliance xenobiologists had theories about Deathworld species, and none of those theories were comforting. Creatures that evolved on worlds like Earth were expected to be violent, unpredictable, and solutions-oriented in the worst possible ways. But 47,000 civilians were going to die if nobody helped them. "Monitor all communications from the area," Zixtal finally decided. "Record everything. If they cause an incident, we'll need documentation for the Council." As his crew reluctantly returned to their duties, Zixtal couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. For decades, the Alliance had maintained peace through careful diplomacy, trade agreements, and the occasional show of force against minor threats. They had built a civilization based on reason, cooperation, and the understanding that violence was always the last resort. But the Void Hunters didn't respond to reason. They were a force of pure destruction that the Alliance had simply learned to avoid. And now, for the first time, something was actually going to fight them. Something from a world where fighting was apparently considered normal. Hours passed slowly on Kepler Station. The crew monitored communications channels obsessively, waiting for some word from the Harmony's dream. The colony ship's distress beacon continued to broadcast, but no other details came through. Either their communication systems were damaged, or they were too busy fighting for their lives to send updates. Zixtal found himself pacing the bridge despite his best efforts to appear calm. His crew looked to him for leadership, but how could he lead when he had no idea what was happening? For all he knew, the human ship had already been destroyed by the Void Hunters. Or perhaps worse, perhaps it had decided the colonists weren't worth saving and had simply left. But deep down, Zixtal suspected the truth was going to be far stranger than either of those possibilities. "Commander!" Quex called suddenly, his tentacles quivering with excitement and terror. "We're receiving a transmission from the coordinates of the Harmony's dream." "On screen," Zixtal ordered. The holographic display shimmered to life, showing the interior of what appeared to be the colony ship's bridge. The captain was a middle-aged Altarian woman named Vesica, and she looked like she had seen the face of divine intervention itself. "This is Captain Vesica of the Harmony's dream," she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of relief and bewilderment. The attack has been repelled. We are secure and proceeding to our original destination." "Repelled?" Zixtal asked. "Captain, please clarify. What happened to the Void Hunter fleet?" Captain Vesica was quiet for a long moment, her eyes staring at something off-screen. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Commander, I honestly don't know how to explain what we just witnessed. The human ship? It didn't fight the Void Hunters. It didn't even try to negotiate with them." "Then what did it do?" "It said hello." Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the tactical display as her ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The colony vessel Harmony's Dream appeared on their sensors, a massive civilian transport that looked like a floating city among the stars. Surrounding it, like hungry sharks, were 7 Void Hunter attack ships, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. "Target analysis complete," reported Lieutenant Marcus Webb from the tactical station. His fingers danced across holographic controls as data streamed across his displays. 7 hostile vessels, heavy cruiser class. They're maintaining attack formation around the colony ship. "Any sign they've noticed us?" Sarah asked. "Negative, Captain. We're still running silent. But—" Marcus paused, frowning at his readouts. "Ma'am, these ships are significantly more advanced than our intelligence report suggested. Their weapon systems are putting out energy signatures that should be impossible for their technology level." Sarah nodded calmly. Human intelligence on galactic civilizations was always incomplete. When Earth had been quarantined by something called the Galactic Peaceful Alliance, humanity had been forced to learn about their cosmic neighbors through careful observation and the occasional intercepted communication. What they had discovered was both fascinating and disappointing. The galaxy was full of intelligent life, but most of it seemed to have developed along remarkably similar paths. They were peaceful, cooperative, and focused on diplomatic solutions to problems. They had advanced technology, comfortable living conditions, and sophisticated social structures. They were also, from a human perspective, completely unprepared for actual conflict. "Communications. Open a channel to the lead Void Hunter vessel," Sarah ordered. "Ma'am?" Ensign Rodriguez looked up from her station with surprise. "Shouldn't we hail the colony ship first?" "The colony ship isn't the problem," Sarah replied. "The Void Hunters are. Let's introduce ourselves." The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of what was presumably the flagship of the pirate fleet. The creature that appeared was unlike anything in the human databases. A tall, insectoid being with multiple arms and compound eyes that reflected the light like polished metal. When it spoke, its voice was translated by the ship's computer into standard English, though the mechanical tone couldn't hide the underlying menace. "What is this? How did you get so close without being detected?" The alien's mandibles clicked rapidly, suggesting agitation. "Identify yourself or be destroyed." "Good afternoon," Sarah said pleasantly, as if she were greeting a neighbor over the fence. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Retribution. I couldn't help but notice you're threatening that colony vessel." The Void Hunter leader's compound eyes seemed to focus more intently on her image. "Earth? There is no planet called Earth in any star chart. What species are you?" "We're humans," Sarah replied. "And you're in violation of several laws regarding the protection of civilian vessels. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." For a moment, the alien stared at her in what appeared to be confusion. Then it began to emit a sound that the computer translated as laughter. "You dare threaten us? You arrive in a single ship and demand that we abandon our prize?" The creature's multiple arms gestured dramatically. "We are the Void Hunters. We have terrorized this galaxy for 3 centuries. No force has ever successfully opposed us." "Well," Sarah said thoughtfully, "there's a first time for everything." Lieutenant Webb leaned forward at his station. "Captain, they're charging weapons. All 7 ships are targeting us." Sarah remained completely calm. "Thank you, Marcus. Are our defensive systems online?" "All systems green, ma'am." "Excellent." Sarah turned back to the screen where the Void Hunter leader was still making threatening gestures. "I'm sorry. Were you saying something about charging weapons?" The alien's expression shifted to something that might have been confusion. "Do you not understand your situation? You are outnumbered 7-1. Your vessel cannot possibly withstand our combined firepower." "Actually," Sarah said, "I think you misunderstand your situation. You're threatening civilians under the protection of Earth. That makes you our problem, and we're very good at solving problems." "Fire!" the Void Hunter screamed. 7 massive energy beams lanced out from the pirate vessels, converging on the Retribution with enough force to vaporize a small moon. The beams struck the human ship and simply disappeared. Sarah checked her tactical display while the Void Hunters stared in shock. "Shield effectiveness 100%, no damage reported." "Impossible!" the alien leader hissed. "No known technology can absorb that much energy." "You're right," Sarah agreed. "We're not absorbing it. We're redirecting it." She paused to check another display. "In fact, your weapons fire has just fully charged our offensive systems. Thank you." The truth was that human military technology had developed along completely different lines than anything else in the galaxy. When Earth had been isolated, humanity had been forced to assume that any eventual contact with galactic civilization might be hostile. They had spent decades developing weapons and defenses based on the assumption that they would be fighting enemies with superior numbers and unknown capabilities. The result was technology that prioritized adaptability, redundancy, and overwhelming response over elegant engineering. "Tactical," Sarah said calmly. "Please demonstrate our appreciation for their assistance with target charging." "Yes, ma'am." "Shall I use the standard diplomatic response?" "That seems appropriate." Lieutenant Webb's fingers moved across his controls with practiced precision. Diplomatic response loaded and ready. Fire. What happened next would have been difficult for most galactic species to comprehend. The Retribution didn't fire energy beams or launch missiles. Instead, it released what humans called a kinetic diplomatic package. A small object about the size of a marble that accelerated to a significant percentage of light speed in a matter of microseconds. The package struck the lead Void Hunter vessel amidships. The result was less like an explosion and more like a miniature star going supernova. The enemy ship simply ceased to exist, replaced by an expanding sphere of plasma and scattered atoms. The shock wave from its destruction sent the other 6 ships tumbling through space like leaves in a hurricane. "Well," Sarah observed, "that got their attention." On the communications screen, the Void Hunter leader was picking itself up from the floor of its bridge while alarms blared in the background. When it looked at the camera again, its compound eyes held an expression that was unmistakably fear. What are you?" "We're humans," Sarah repeated patiently. "We come from a planet called Earth, which your Galactic Alliance has classified as a death world and quarantined for the past 40 years. We've been listening to your communications during that time, learning about galactic civilization, and we've noticed a problem." "A problem?" "Pirates," Sarah said simply. "You prey on innocent civilians because no one has the will or the capability to stop you. That ends today." The alien leader's mandibles clicked frantically. "You cannot fight all of us. We have hundreds of ships." "Yes, you do," Sarah agreed. "And we know where all of them are." This was true. Human intelligence networks had been tracking Void Hunter movements for years, mapping their bases, their supply lines, and their command structure. It was a hobby that several Earth military organizations pursued when they weren't busy preparing for potential galactic invasion. "Lieutenant Rodriguez," Sarah said, "please transmit the Void Hunter orbital coordinates to the colony ship. I'm sure they'd like to report the locations to proper authorities." "Yes, ma'am. Transmitting all known pirate base locations now." On screen, the Void Hunter leader seemed to deflate. You have been watching us?" "For years," Sarah confirmed. "We find you interesting from an anthropological perspective. Your organizational structure, your tactical preferences, your psychological profiles, we've compiled quite extensive files." This was perhaps the most terrifying thing the alien had heard yet. It was one thing to be outgunned. It was another thing entirely to discover that an unknown enemy had been studying you like a laboratory specimen. "What do you want?" the alien asked weakly. "It's very simple," Sarah said. "You're going to leave this sector immediately. You're going to return all stolen property to its rightful owners, and you're going to find a new profession that doesn't involve threatening innocent people." "And if we refuse?" Sarah smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Then we'll have to solve the Void Hunter problem permanently, and trust me, we're very thorough when we solve problems." The alien stared at her for a long moment, then at the expanding cloud of debris that had once been its flagship. We will consider your proposal," it finally managed. "You have 24 hours, Sarah said. "After that? We'll assume you've chosen the permanent solution option." She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. "Well, that was fun. Helm, bring us alongside the colony ship. I'd like to make sure they're all right." As the Retribution moved toward the Harmony's Dream, the 6 remaining Void Hunter ships began to retreat at maximum speed. Sarah watched them go with satisfaction. It had been a good day. "Captain," Lieutenant Webb reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the colony ship. They're requesting permission to come aboard and thank us personally." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "That's unusual. Most galactic species prefer to maintain distance from unknown contacts." "Should I tell them no, ma'am?" Sarah considered this. Humans had been isolated for decades, and this was their first real opportunity to interact with galactic civilians. It might be useful to establish positive relationships. "No, let them come aboard, but make sure the diplomatic staff knows to be especially friendly. These people have just been through a traumatic experience, and meeting their first humans probably isn't helping their stress levels." Minutes later, Captain Veska of the Harmony's Dream materialized in the Retribution's transport chamber, accompanied by a small delegation of her senior officers. Sarah was waiting for them with her own staff, and she could see the exact moment when the aliens got their first close look at humans. They all took several steps backward. Sarah couldn't really blame them. Humans had developed on a high-gravity world with an oxygen-rich atmosphere and numerous predatory species. This had given them several physical characteristics that most galactic species found disturbing. forward-facing eyes, prominent canine teeth, dense muscle and bone structure, and a general appearance that suggested they were designed for violence. "Captain Veska," Sarah said, stepping forward slowly with her hands visible. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen. It's a pleasure to meet you." The Alterian woman stared up at her with wide eyes. Sarah realized she was probably imposing, being nearly 2 feet taller than the alien captain, but there wasn't much she could do about that. You saved us," Captain Vesica said finally. 47,000 civilians were about to die, and you saved us." "It was our pleasure," Sarah replied sincerely. "We don't like bullies. But the Void Hunters have terrorized the galaxy for centuries. No military force has ever successfully engaged them. How did you—" Sarah considered how to explain human military doctrine to someone from a peaceful civilization. "We approach conflict differently than most species, I think. When someone threatens innocent people, our response is to make them stop threatening innocent people. We're willing to use whatever level of force that requires." Captain Veska looked around at the human officers, all of whom appeared calm and professional, despite having just vaporized a heavily armed warship. "Are all humans like you?" she asked. Sarah smiled. "More or less. We're a diverse species, but we do share certain common traits. We don't like injustice. We protect those who can't protect themselves. And we're very, very stubborn when someone tells us something is impossible. The Galactic Alliance said your world was too dangerous for contact," Captain Vesica said softly. "They weren't entirely wrong," Sarah admitted. "Earth is a challenging place to live. It made us into challenging people to fight. But being dangerous and being evil are two very different things." For the first time since the attack, Captain Vesica smiled. "I think the galaxy is about to become a much safer place." 3 months after the Void Hunter incident, Commander Zixtal found himself standing in the most important meeting room in the galaxy. The Grand Council Chamber of the Galactic Peaceful Alliance was a magnificent structure, with representatives from over 200 species arranged in concentric circles around a central speaking platform. The architecture was designed to inspire cooperation and peaceful dialogue. Today, it felt more like a pressure cooker about to explode. "The motion before the Council," announced Speaker Vexthul from the central podium, her crystalline voice echoing through the chamber, "is whether to officially recognize the planet Earth and establish diplomatic relations with the human species." Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. Some species chittered nervously. Others remained silent, their eyes fixed on the small section of the chamber where the human delegation sat waiting. Zixtal studied the humans with fascination and barely concealed terror. There were 5 of them, led by a woman who had introduced herself as Ambassador Elena Vasquez. They appeared calm and professional, dressed in simple dark blue uniforms that somehow managed to look both diplomatic and vaguely military. What unsettled Zixtal most was how relaxed they seemed. Every other species in the chamber was visibly nervous about this historic moment, but the humans just sat there like they were waiting for a routine committee meeting. "The chair recognizes Representative Kexanar of the Benthari Confederation," Speaker Vexthul announced. A tall, thin alien with purple skin and multiple tentacle-like appendages rose from his seat. His species was known for their careful, logical approach to problems, and his voice carried the weight of considered authority. "Honored Speaker, fellow delegates," Kexnar began, his tentacles gesturing formally. "While we all appreciate the humans' assistance in resolving the Void Hunter crisis, we must consider the broader implications of formally recognizing a Deathworld species." Zixtal noticed that several human heads turned slightly to focus on Kexnar, but their expressions remained neutral. It was like being watched by a pack of very polite predators. "The humans claim to be peaceful," Kexnar continued, "but their military capabilities are beyond anything in our experience. In 3 months, they have eliminated not just the Void Hunter fleet that attacked the Harmony's Dream, but 17 other pirate groups throughout the galaxy. Their methods, while effective, demonstrate a level of strategic planning and tactical execution that suggests long-term preparation for large-scale conflict. This was true, and everyone knew it. After word of the first incident had spread, other civilian vessels had begun requesting human assistance when threatened by pirates or raiders. In every case, the humans had responded quickly and decisively. Pirates who had terrorized the space lanes for decades were simply gone. The human fleet was small, perhaps 50 ships total, but they moved with a precision and effectiveness that made them seem like a much larger force. More concerning to many council members was how thoroughly prepared they had been. When they emerged from their quarantined system, they already had detailed intelligence on every major criminal organization in the galaxy, complete tactical assessments of all known military forces, and communication equipment that was compatible with galactic standards. They had been planning for this moment for decades. Furthermore, Kexanar said, his voice growing more serious, we must consider what the humans represent philosophically. Our civilization is built on the principle that conflicts should be resolved through diplomacy, trade agreements, and mutual understanding. The humans appear to believe that some conflicts can only be resolved through superior firepower. Ambassador Vasquez raised her hand slightly, and Speaker Vexthul nodded to her. May I respond? The human asked politely. The floor recognizes Ambassador Elena Vasquez of Earth, Vexthul announced. Elena stood gracefully and walked to the central speaking platform. She was tall by galactic standards, but she moved with a fluid confidence that somehow managed to be both diplomatic and slightly threatening. Thank you, honored speaker, Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Representative Kexnar raises valid concerns, and I'd like to address them directly. She paused to look around the chamber, making eye contact with delegates from multiple species. It's true that humans approach conflict resolution differently than most galactic civilizations. This is because we come from a world where conflict was unavoidable. On Earth, diplomacy works when all parties benefit from peaceful resolution. But sometimes, you encounter individuals or groups who profit from violence and chaos. For those situations, you need a different approach. Murmurs rippled through the chamber again. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Void Hunters had been terrorizing civilian populations for 3 centuries, Elena continued. During that time, the Galactic Alliance attempted diplomatic solutions 17 times. Trade embargo attempts failed because pirates don't engage in legitimate trade. Economic sanctions failed because they operated outside legitimate economic systems. Military deterrence failed because no alliance force was willing to accept casualties in direct confrontation. Elena's voice remained calm and professional, but her words carried an underlying steel that made many delegates nervous. We solved the Void Hunter problem in 3 months because we were willing to do what was necessary. Not because we enjoy violence, but because we understand that some people only respond to strength. Representative Kexnar spoke up from his seat. But what happens when you become the threat? What happens when humanity decides that other species aren't managing their affairs correctly? Elena smiled, and somehow the expression was both reassuring and slightly dangerous. That's an excellent question. Let me answer it by sharing some information about human history. She gestured, and a holographic display appeared above the platform showing a blue-green world orbiting a yellow star. Earth currently has a population of 8 billion humans, divided into approximately 200 separate political entities. We have different governments, different cultures, different economic systems, and different approaches to social organization. For most of our recorded history, these groups have been in conflict with each other. The display shifted to show various historical scenes, cities, armies, technological development, space exploration. We learned to manage internal conflict not because we're naturally peaceful, but because we're naturally competitive. When one group develops better technology or more effective strategies, other groups adapt or risk being left behind. This created constant pressure for innovation, improvement, and cooperation. Elena looked directly at Kexnar. The result is a species that's very good at finding solutions to problems, but also very aware of the dangers of unchecked power. We know exactly what happens when someone becomes the biggest threat in their environment because we've seen it happen repeatedly in our own history. So, how do we know humans won't simply take over the galaxy? Asked another delegate from somewhere in the upper tiers. Because, Elena replied, we don't want to run the galaxy. We want to live in a galaxy where civilian ships can travel safely, where pirates don't prey on innocent people, and where we can trade, explore, and learn alongside other intelligent species. She gestured again, and the display shifted to show star charts with marked shipping routes, pirate incidents, and patrol areas. In the 3 months since our first contact, pirate incidents along major shipping routes have decreased by 73%. Not because we're patrolling those routes ourselves, but because word has spread that humans will respond to attacks on civilian vessels. We've created a deterrent effect. Speaker Vexthul spoke up from her podium. Ambassador Vasquez, what exactly are you proposing? A mutual defense agreement, Elena replied simply. Formal diplomatic relations between Earth and the Galactic Alliance, with a specific provision that humans will assist in defending civilian populations against criminal organizations that don't respond to traditional diplomatic solutions. The chamber erupted in discussion. Delegates turned to each other, speaking in dozens of different languages about the implications of what the human was suggesting. Commander Zixtal found himself thinking about the past 3 months. It was true that space travel had become safer since the humans had emerged from their quarantine. Merchant vessels that had been avoiding entire sectors due to pirate activity were now resuming normal trade routes. Colonies that had been under constant threat were now focusing on development instead of defense. But it was also true that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted overnight. The Alliance military, which had never been designed for serious combat, was now essentially irrelevant. If the humans decided they didn't like how something was being managed, there was no force in the galaxy that could stop them from changing it. What guarantees do we have, called out another delegate, that humans will limit themselves to fighting pirates and criminals? Elena considered this for a moment. None, she said honestly. You have our word that we'll honor any agreements we make, and you have our track record over the past 3 months. But ultimately, you have the same guarantee you have with any powerful neighbor, that it's in our mutual interest to maintain peaceful relationships. That's not very reassuring, someone called out. It's the only honest answer I can give you, Elena replied. We could promise never to interfere in galactic affairs, but you've already seen that we're willing to interfere when we think it's necessary. We could promise to always follow Alliance law, but some of your laws wouldn't work on a death world. What we can promise is that we'll be honest about our intentions, transparent about our capabilities, and committed to protecting innocent people. Speaker Vexthul called for order as the discussion threatened to get out of hand. The Council will now hear from individual delegations before voting on the recognition proposal. For the next 4 hours, representatives from various species stood to voice their opinions. Some supported formal relations with Earth, pointing to the dramatic improvement in galactic security. Others expressed concern about inviting a predator species into galactic civilization. A few suggested compromise positions, such as limited trade agreements or joint military exercises. Through it all, the human delegations sat quietly, listening to everything without apparent concern. Zixtal realized that this was perhaps the most unsettling thing about them. They seemed confident that the vote would go their way regardless of what anyone said. Finally, Speaker Vexthul called for the formal vote. All delegations in favor of recognizing Earth and establishing diplomatic relations? Lights began appearing throughout the chamber as delegates registered their votes. Zixtal watched the tally display with growing amazement. The final count was closer than he had expected, but clear. 127 in favor, 89 opposed, 31 abstentions. "The motion carries," Speaker Vex Thule announced. "Earth is hereby recognized as a sovereign member of the galactic community, and the Galactic Alliance will establish formal diplomatic relations." Ambassador Vasquez stood and bowed formally to the chamber. "On behalf of humanity, I thank the Council for this opportunity. We look forward to working with all of you to build a safer, more prosperous galaxy." As the session ended and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Zixtal found himself walking near the human delegation. Ambassador Vasquez noticed him and approached with a friendly smile. "Commander Zixtal, isn't it?" she said. "You were the one who first detected our response to the Harmony's Dream distress call." "Yes, ma'am," Zixtal replied, somewhat surprised that she knew who he was. "I wanted to thank you for that," Elena said. "You could have tried to stop us from responding or warned us away from the area. Instead, you let us help." Zixtal considered this. "I suppose I was curious to see what would happen." Elena laughed, a sound that was somehow both pleasant and predatory. "Well, now you know. Humans show up when someone calls for help, and we're very good at making problems go away permanently." As she walked away with her delegation, Zixtal realized that the galaxy had just entered a new era. For the first time in centuries, there was a force capable of imposing order through strength rather than diplomacy. Whether that was a good thing or a terrifying thing remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. The age of the Deathworlders had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. 3 weeks later, Zixtal received a report that the last known Void Hunter stronghold had surrendered to human forces without firing a shot. The pirates had apparently decided that honest work was preferable to extinction. Looking at that report, Zixtal finally understood what Ambassador Vasquez had meant about deterrent effects. Sometimes, the most effective weapon was simply being known as someone who would use their weapons when necessary. The humans, it seemed, had figured that out long before they ever left their death world. And now, the galaxy was going to benefit from that hard-earned wisdom, whether they liked it or not.